starting late. It's 2:03. But we do have a quorum. I'm going to announce a couple of proxies that we have here. Mayor Pro Tem Fuentes has Judge Brown's proxy. Commissioner Howard has Amy Patillo's proxy. I have Mayor Craig Morgan's proxy. Commissioner Theriault has Commissioner Beckett's proxy. Mayor Schrader has Matt Harris's proxy. And Councilmember Matea has Commissioner Trevillion's proxy. So I think we've got everybody covered here. All right, so with that.
Chair Long,
yes.
Someone should have Debbie Inglesby's proxy.
We were not notified about it.
Okay,
So-
never mind.
Oh, wait a minute. Did she say that, or was that the last meeting?
I don't remember.
We'll have to, I may
Yeah,
have.
we'll have to check.
We'll have to check. Thank you. We will check.
Did you have it, Mayor?
I do not. I did my usual, do you want to ride with me? And she said she's out of town, but she had sent something in.
She may have sent it in.
Let me just make sure.
Yeah, let me. We will check on that. Thank you. And then I'll circle back on it. Item number 2, public comments. Did we have anybody sign up? You have the other one too? Okay, thank you. All right, for public comment, which is item number, that's on item number 5. So there isn't anybody for actual public comments. So we don't need item number 3, executive session. Item number 4, is there a report from the TAC?
I'll provide that. Thank you, Chair Long. The Technical Advisory Committee met on September 22nd. We had an action item on the agenda to approve nominations for the TAC Transportation Demand Management, or TDM, subcommittee. At the previous TAC meeting in August, we had requested nominations from the agencies on TAC for representatives on the subcommittee, and the TAC unanimously approved the slate of 7 candidates that we received and presented. Following this, we had information items on the amendments to the 2025-2028 Transportation Improvement Program and the 2050 Regional Transportation Plan. And we had a discussion on the 2028 to 2031 call for projects, and both of those items are on the agenda for the board today as well. And happy to take any questions on these items.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay. With that, thank you for the update. We will keep moving on. Item number 5 is the public hearing on amendments to the TIP, and we do have 2 people who have signed up for that one. The first one is Bobby Levinsky, and then the second one is Chris Flores. Bobby, if you'd come up first, and Chris, if you would stand in the ready for that. And you'll have 3 minutes. Let me get my timer going here. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Bobby Levinsky, I'm with the Save Our Springs Alliance. On the TIP, there is one project that I want to call your attention to in the hopes that we can have maybe additional dialogue about it. Until the money is spent, I do believe that there's still opportunity to potentially set a better course for it. It is MPO ID 5100189-12. It's $25 million towards the construction of a boardwalk next to the Hyatt Regency Hotel on Lady Bird Lake. That money is coming from the I-35 mitigation. Yes, it was identified in the record of decision. I think the question here, though, is given the impacts to the parkland that's happening along I-35, closer to I-35, is that truly the mitigation that you want to see all the way over between South First Street and South Congress Avenue to build a boardwalk that could easily be substituted with an on-site expansion of the trail next to the Hyatt Regency? All that takes is a rezoning change. There's been a lot of conversations at the City of Austin about the vision for that area, so I'm really speaking to the Austin delegation here on this item in hopes that you can work with us on a solution that maybe gets that money and puts it towards some mitigation that could better support the East Austin communities that are being impacted by the I-35 expansion, especially the ones that are closest to the I-35 expansion itself, including Rendon Park. There is opportunities here where there's going to be comments that a larger number of people are going to be submitting as part of the official written comments for this public hearing, and we hope that you will at least engage with us in a dialogue about what could be a better solution here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Chris Flores, and your time begins now.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Flores. I am a retired TxDOT employee, and I'm speaking on the same item as Mr. Lewinsky. The $25 million, us citizen parks watchers have been following this dollar amount, and as it moved from a memo from the mayor saying the money was going to be given to the Trail Conservancy to build a boardwalk, we don't understand why a Parks Conservancy is in the construction business. I would trust TxDOT with all my heart to build a bridge anywhere successfully, but this giving away the money to a nonprofit makes no sense to us. And then we've sort of been following, what is this money supposed to be intended for? Is it to mitigate parkland lost? Well, there's a group of employees at the Parks Department who specialize in buying parkland. They could take that $25 million and make good use of it. If it's intended to be transportation along the trail in a heavily touristed area, well then a boardwalk may not be the best way to spend $25 million. I think TxDOT could come up with a different way to do that and build it for us. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the public comment on item number 5.
Okay.
So we will go ahead and, Ryan, if you've got a presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so I'll do a quick presentation. So this is the public hearing for the Transportation Improvement Program amendments, as well as the Regional Transportation Plan. And so this is the fall amendment cycle. Twice a year, we have a regularly scheduled opportunity to make major changes, both to the Regional Transportation Plan and Transportation Improvement Program. So anytime a project receives new federal funding, or there's significant changes both with the limits, scope, or the federal funding of an existing project, we need to reflect those in the Transportation Improvement Program. And likewise, with the Regional Transportation Plan, it's an opportunity to make changes to that list. And then anything that's changed in the Transportation Improvement Program also gets amended into the Regional Transportation Plan as well to make sure that they're consistent. And so we've taken this to the Technical Advisory Committee as information, and we've held 6 in-person open houses throughout the region. And we've got an open comment period. I think that date's actually going to be extended a little bit from the end of this week until next. And then after this public hearing, we'll take it back to the Technical Advisory Committee for a recommendation, and then bring this back next month for potential adoption by the Policy Board. So the amendments themselves are pretty straightforward. I think we have some funds being moved around within the I-35 project. Again, these are breakout projects. The overall scope and funding amounts have not changed, so nothing's really changed. They're just moving funding between the breakout projects. And then we've got several changes. FM 812, they're actually extending the limits by about a mile on that project. And then we've got some transit projects as well. The city of Round Rock is going to make some improvements to their facilities, and so we're including that funding. And then I also want to bring up the Austin Transit Partnership, the Austin Light Rail phase. This was something that was not in the original amendment list. I do want to point out we've been the Austin Transit Partnership staff submitted their application on time, and then Ashby and I and the Austin Transit Partnership have been having discussions with the Federal Transit Administration to make sure that we are this is a project that's going through the New Starts Capital Improvements Grant Program, which is an iterative process. in order to receive federal funding. And because it wasn't fully funded with federal transportation dollars, it didn't necessarily need to be included in the TIP at the time. But having discussions with the Federal Transit Administration through that process, they do need to be included at this point. And so we wanted to make sure that the project met fiscal constraint, but also allowed the Austin Transit Partnership to move through that grant process and move forward with those approvals that through that process. So what we are, those have been the local funding. We have the engineering and right-of-way. These 4 listings at the end there. So this is all completely locally funded phases of the project and allows the Austin Transit Partnership to enter into an agreement with FTA once they complete the environmental process later this year. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Ashby, are you going to highlight, or do you want to, about the reason for extending the comment period? Or Joyce?
Sure, I can take that. So as Ryan mentioned, the Austin Transit Partnership amendments were not initially in this list, and so we are adding them to the list along with an updated map. So we just thought to give the public a little bit more time to be able to review the Austin Transit Partnership amendments and to review the materials in the map, that we could give the public another week to do that. So with that, the public participation plan, which is your next agenda item, that comment period runs through next Friday, October 17th. So we're also extending the TIP amendments to go through October 17th as well.
And Madam Chair, I'll add a little bit to what Joyce said as well. So even though we're asking to extend that public input deadline to the 17th, it has always been our practice to continue to accept public comment up until the time that this body actually acts on something. So given, 1, the extension that we're asking for, and then 2, by the time we come to next month's meeting, the ATP item will have been out to the public for at least 30 days, actually more than 30 days. So long and short on that, I didn't want ATP to be penalized for something that wasn't their doing.
Yeah. So we just, I wanted a little bit further explanation so folks would know that we are trying to achieve that 30-day public notice and accommodate the change in schedule as well. So, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. My question is, on the removal of the TIP, of the TIP, we have 2 SH71 projects, but one in particular I want to draw everyone's attention on the board is SH71 Ben White heading out to the airport, which is due for 3 additional east frontage roads. The amount of traffic we have going through and to the airport is significant and only continues to increase. We see thousands of passengers every single day at our airport, and there have been a number of incidents and crashes on 71. And anytime there's a crash on 71, it does have an effect on passengers' experience at our airport, and we know that AUS is a regional airport for Central Texas, and so this amendment here on the TIP is to move the projects to later. It's going to be removed from the current TIP and move to a later fiscal year. So I'm wondering if staff could speak to why we would be removing that from the TIP, given the high priority of connectivity and the needs of our region.
Yeah.
I might take TxDOT to speak to that.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
Councilmember, it's simply a timing issue of getting that project developed with the resources we have, but also coordinating it with ATP and a possible extension of the Blue Line to the airport. I know they're pursuing that, and we'd like to build those together if we could, because they're going to be in the same basic footprint with the rail going over top. So we would rather build those 2 projects at the same time. And the airport, with their master plan and some expansion, there's basically 3 entities trying to come together to align schedules for those projects to be done as efficiently as possible.
That's great. No, I'm a huge supporter of ensuring that we're able to connect the rail line to the airport. So if this removal is to allow for that consideration of being able to combine these high-profile projects, then I'm in full support of that.
One of the pieces, not the sole piece for that, it's not for that reason, but that's one of the considerations that we are able to spread our resources out a little bit longer and collaborate on that with ATP.
Is it also a funding issue?
Our project, I believe, is funded. I'm not sure if the extension of the Blue Line is funded on ATP side.
Right, but is there what were the other reasons as to why we would remove it from the TIP, aside from the light rail?
Well, then we put it's in the time frame as well, right? In the 4 years. That's why we're pushing it.
Yeah, because you want to answer that part?
Yeah, I mean, this runs through fiscal year 2028, and we are going to be adopting a new TIP next year in May, and this project will show back up in the Transportation Improvement Program at that time, because those years will be 27 through 30.
And that's what I thought you were going to lead with.
Yeah. They're going to be out for about 6 months, and then they're going to come right back in. So it's really just a timing issue with the TIP program
So
timeframe.
it's generally speaking a 6-month-ish delay?
Well, the fiscal year is getting moved out to 2030, but it'll get reprogrammed in the next iteration of the Transportation Improvement Program, so it'll be back on the schedule. Because our program only looks at 4 years, and we're at the tail end of the life cycle of this current program, and so we'll show up in the next one.
Okay. I think if I can have a follow-up meeting with TxDOT, I think that'll be helpful on this project, and certainly with support, and perhaps this is an opportunity for our board to take action, just again, given that the airport is a regional airport for us in Central Texas, and we want to ensure that people can get to the airport on time and that we can minimize any type of incidents or crashes from occurring. Thank you.
So my perspective, what I brought up, and that's why I was like, were you going to leave with that or not from there, is that, again, when we talk about the TIP, we talk about things that are going to be project ready, turnkey, essentially, for a better lack of term, the actions with that. The timing for what's actually trying to be done here isn't changing, but the ability to actually go ahead and do it all at once as opposed to piecemeal, which is a big factor, and one of the reasons why we have that app and everything else that we keep hearing from people saying, hey, wait a minute, if you're going to do these things, why take these things in various different actions? Why not do it at us from a disruption standpoint was the key here. I had heard that the Blue Line, I guess we'll find out, we can always just talk to Greg and them about that, may not be funded yet at that portion, and this one's ready to go. But my preference always is that if we're going to disrupt people's lives,
Do it once.
Yeah, do it once, get it done, and get it organized from that standpoint. But from a funding standpoint, it's still going to be in there anyway, 6 months later.
All right. Any other questions?
Chair, could TxDOT, Tucker, also tell us about the FM 812, what's going on out there? I'm excited about that.
So 812 has been funded, I believe, in our UTP from the last cycle. We have it sorted or separated by different segments. There's
Okay.
a piece from 183 to 130, and then the piece from 130 to, and the roadway limit escapes my memory right now. That's the one where we are prioritizing and working with our partners at the Circuit of the Americas to get that expanded to handle the additional traffic
Great.
that is coming their way. Travis County's, more of their priority is on the S-curves and smoothing those out for safety reasons, and we agree with that also, but we have two parallel tracks going on those, the expansion for capacity by CODA, and then Travis County's piece on the safety side. So both of those are going at the same time, but they are separate projects.
Great, thank you.
Tucker, remind me, are we putting, when we go out and redo H12, are we putting sidewalks in?
Repeat that, please.
Are we putting sidewalks in when we go out and touch H12?
I believe so, but
Okay.
I would have to check. On 812, I believe
Yes.
we are. I
Okay,
believe we are, but I would have to
That's what I
check.
thought, and I'm raising that, Commissioner, because of the events at CODA. There's folks parking further and walking in, and there have been issues with folks getting hit with mirrors.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to.
I believe, and I believe actually it would only be from the piece from 130 in front of CODA. I'm not convinced of that on the west side of 130 to 183.
Yeah.
But I can verify that.
The table in our packet says going west from 130 to Peterson Road, it would include bicycle and pedestrian facilities.
So I need to pull up the spreadsheet like Mayor did to refresh my memory. I don't have that one memorized. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. And just as a reminder, this is just the public hearing, so we will take action on that next month. Okay. That brings us to item number 6, updates to the public participation plan. Joyce.
Thank you, Chair Long. So this is the public hearing for updates to the public participation plan. What I presented last month is just a reminder that the updates that we're making to the public participation plan, or the PPP, are being done in order to reflect the recent presidential executive orders and federal guidance. So we are not changing any of the community outreach processes or the requirements. We are updating the interactive tools and commenting and other tools that are that we've been using the past few years. We're adding those into the appendix. So an overview of the 2019 updates that this board adopted. At that point in time, there was a tiered system. There was not a specific requirement for the regional transportation plan or other programs that CAMPO conducts. There wasn't requirements for outreach for the transportation improvement program or for the studies that we do. So we did add requirements for the regional transportation plan, the RTP, which this board adopted in May. So we now have a two-phase outreach program for that. We also have requirements, as you see today, for the transportation improvement program, as well as making updates to the public participation plan. We also added requiring online open houses and commenting. So the timeline for this update, we presented this at the last board meeting. The public hearing is occurring today, and then this body will have the action item at its next meeting in November. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions of Joyce? Just my compliments again. Our plan is looked to by many, not just in the state, but across the nation for its robustness. So congratulations on the work. All right, if there's no further discussion, we will move on. Again, that one also is public hearing and updates on that, or public hearing. So we'll move on to item number 7. And is there a motion on the minutes from the last meeting?
Houston will make that motion.
Oh, okay. I thought Mayor Pro Tem was
Who made the
talking about
motion?
I will, or I'll
Okay.
second it, or whomever.
All right, motion is, and I'll second it for discussion. Did you have a comment on the minutes? Oh, okay, sorry, I just thought she was doing her job. All right, so we'll give you the second. All right, so motion by Mayor Houston, second by Mayor Pro Tem Fuentes. Any discussion? All right, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Item number 8, discuss and take appropriate action on the 2028-2031 call for projects. We have one person that has signed up for public comment on this one, Lonnie Stern. If you'll come to the microphone. And you'll have 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, members of the Policy Board. My name is Lonnie Stern. I'm the Executive Director of Movability, which is the Transportation Management Association for Central Texas. Today I'm speaking on item number 8 because it does affect nonprofit organizations operating throughout Central Texas. And in particular, it says that we would need to secure a letter of intent before applying for CAMPO funds, specifically the Surface Transportation Block Grant and the Carbon Reduction Program. So first, I want to mention that there are some things that are unclear in the proposal. First, it seems to be talking about construction projects, and it's unclear if this also impacts planning or programming projects. I mention this because a lot of our projects aren't construction. In fact, we do transportation demand management, so a lot of our programs are decidedly not construction. They are programming to avoid construction, and so we're not sure if there's a loophole there. Also, it specifically states 501c3. We have been operating as a 501c6. So do chambers of commerce. So does that mean that all of us are not subject to this order, or is this very specific to 501c or 501c3s? That is also unclear. In addition, I just want to point out how these things work. When we apply for funds, we normally get a letter of support from our government agency. Then we apply for funding. If we are awarded the funding, then the government agency goes through the effort of bringing their legal team in to secure a letter of intent where we decide how we're going to work through the funds. It's very rare that a government agency puts together an LOI before you have funding for a project. Now, with that said, we do have LOIs in place with the City of Austin and with Cap Metro, and I think it's been mentioned at this body that you have this in place. But we ran into this being a problem last year when we applied in December for CRP because the LOI in place doesn't reflect our actual agreement. We had funding that was pending from the federal government. That funding was held up until May. And so while we have an actual funding agreement with the city in place now, in December of last year, that funding agreement was a few $100,000 less than it is now. So we wouldn't have had, and in fact didn't have the matching funds to guarantee approval. In addition, I just want to point out that this ignores some new projects as well. It assumes that we're already here and working on existing projects, and that's why we would have LOIs. But for example, we've been working with senior organizations on starting a new dispatching service so that
wrap it up.
Senior organizations don't have to work across different territories, and many of them don't have LOIs in place at all. So you'd be completely negating any senior orgs from working unless they work through us as a fiduciary. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Lonnie. All right, that was all that signed up for comment on that particular agenda item. Ryan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you. So we're bringing back this item from last month where we had a good discussion, and we're preparing to launch the 2028 to 2031 call for projects. I think it's always helpful to kind of step back and remind everyone we are directly responsible as a policy board for allocating funding to regional projects using surface transportation block grant funding, which is the majority of the funding that we receive from the federal government for distribution. This is a very flexible source of funds. And it's about 90% of the funding that this policy board has authorization to allocate to individual projects. This project call will also include transportation alternative set-aside and carbon reduction program funding. The TASA funding is specifically for smaller scale transportation projects, typically bike and pedestrian projects. And then the new carbon reduction program, which we allocated funding for last year, is for any projects that reduce emissions and congestion. This includes all TASA eligible activities, but also includes ITS and technology programs, as well as transportation demand management and any other measures that reduce emissions in the region. So this is the tentative schedule. So this action today really represents kind of the last step as we prepare to launch the call for projects. So we are preparing to make the announcement on this Friday and to post the application along with all of the materials and the guidance and the policies, as well as the links for all the webinars that we'll be doing over the next month, so you can register for those. And so we are preparing to launch that on the 10th. And so the due date is now January 30th, 2026. So that gives sponsors about 3.5 months to prepare an application. And then at that point, we'll begin the review process in the spring. We are tentatively scheduled to bring this project call to be wrapped up on June 8th, 2026. But depending on the complexity of the projects we receive and the amount of projects, if we need a few more months for review, we'll ask the board to extend that until August or September. So we'll just see what we get. Based on the conversation I've been having with local governments, they expect this to be a very competitive project call. And so, which is a good thing, but it probably means we're going to have a lot to review. So, which is the most important part of that process, and we need to make sure that we take the time to get through that review process, appropriately. So we'll be bringing that back, and so we'll update the policy board in February once we see what we've received. I think it's important to take a step back, and so the process itself is a methodical process where we look at the eligibility, determining that the project and the sponsors themselves meet federal funding program requirements. And then step 2 is where we do the readiness evaluation, which is probably the meat of the evaluation process, where we determine a project can complete all the required milestones and be let on schedule. We make sure that the sponsor has developed the project appropriately, and so that if this body awards that sponsor funding, they can move forward with it in the manner they've proposed in the application. And that is the lengthiest part of the evaluation process. And so projects that make it through step 1 and 2, we then go through the benefit evaluation process, which looks at the predicted benefits on a regional scale of what that project would provide this region. And based on those evaluation results, each project will receive a score, and then all those scores are combined into a recommendation, and we rank where all the projects are ranked together, and then we move down that list and recommend funding as we have funding available.
Ryan, before you move on from that, the question has come up on what's our line in the sand date on readiness, since this is funding that's not going to be available till the fall of 27, basically. Are we saying readiness, does it have to be 60% plans? So further define that, because I know that's come up.
Yeah, and that's in the guide, and that's a really good question, because readiness is very contextual. So depending on where you are, we're looking at where you are today, and then where you need to be successfully led. And that's going to be different for every project. It really depends on the complexity of the project. A very straightforward sidewalk project doesn't need as much design as a multimodal roadway project So it's very context sensitive. We have the 15 metrics that we look at systematically as we go through that process, but it really depends on what phase you're asking for. If you're asking for engineering versus construction, your readiness threshold is going to be a little bit different. So it really looks at where your project is today and where you need to be, and then just making sure that you can make that jump, essentially.
Let me be more specific. I think the question is, since the funds won't be available till then, so is readiness on that date, or is it readiness in January when it's submitted? Because there's a lot of work that can be done on a lot of projects between January and the following September.
Yeah, and that's a good point.
So I think we need to.
And I think we can clarify that, Chair. So a lot of it is, as Ryan is saying, it'll depend on, 1, what it is you're asking for, and then 2, what letting year you're asking to go in. So you need to be ready by the time for that letting year that you're going in. So if it's later, and then you've got more time to get stuff. But we want to see reasonable progress. That's why we're tracking it.
Okay, so let's say Pflugerville wants to submit Bevo Boulevard, because they have a council member there that loves that.
Sounds like a very important project.
I thought you were going to say Reveille.
Well, no, we've already got Reveille in Williamson County, but Bevo Boulevard, and it's at 60% plans in January, but they fully expect the plans to be finished and well along the way with right-of-way acquisition before September of 27. So are they considered ready? Because I think because of the long time frame, we need to be very specific and not be ambiguous on that in terms of what that means.
And using that example, I think, as long as the unknowns are known, even if you haven't gotten them done. So one of the things we ask for in the application is how much right-of-way do you need, making sure you've identified all of that right-of-way so we know exactly what you need to do to get, even if getting that right-of-way is going to take 3 years, we know you've identified it and you've got it in place, and you've got the method to get that right-of-way. So it's a risk assessment, really, and 60% design I would feel incredibly confident with, saying that that's good enough. I'd say 60. If you're asking for construction funds, I would say 60% is probably the minimum. But yeah, it's really, as long as you have everything identified, because I think the concern is if a project like that, you have 60% design, but if you haven't identified the right-of-way or the utilities that are out there, then that's a big unknown risk that you don't have the information for. So it's really about providing the information so we know exactly what needs to be done. Even if it hasn't been done, we know what that road looks like, the proverbial road. So.
And then, I think this might be a Cynthia-specific question, but many of the projects that I suspect people are going to be submitting might require levels of environmental review, and the timeliness of that is not within their control.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that, when Caldwell County submits a project and everything's ready except that environmental review, that doesn't penalize them on readiness.
No, and that's actually something we expanded in the guidance about the readiness, because until you federalize a project, you're not going to go for NEPA clearance unless you know you're going to federalize it at some point. And so what we're looking for, at least any solid planning process, will include all the pieces of NEPA should be there. When you're going through the permitting process, when you're going through the early planning process, you're looking at environmental constraints. And so the application, what it will ask for is, give us all the environmental data you have, and we're going to sit down with the TxDOT Austin District, look at that data, figure out what that classification would be, and kind of schedule that out and see where it would land, if it's going to be an EIS or open-ended D-list. And so we're going to be reviewing that with TxDOT, so we know exactly how long that process is going to take should we fund it. But again, it's one of those things. I think most projects that have been developed appropriately will have that environmental data. You just got to wrap it up in the NEPA process, really.
So to be clear, we're not going to hold a project responsible for something that is entirely beyond their control.
Yes.
But the aspects of what would be a NEPA process need to be somewhat addressed. Because when you're federalizing a project, you've got additional things you have to do.
Yeah, and we actually that's one of the phases you can request funding for. So even if you've done all the engineering and you're asking for construction, you can combine those additional environmental burden costs in your cost estimate, and we can put that in the recommendation as well.
And then, Chair, we expect that sometimes things will have to shift, either because of NEPA and waiting for a ROD on NEPA or something else. And so, we make those amendments all the time at the request of the sponsor.
And functional classification.
I'm just talking about in terms of scoring a project, that's not
No, no, ma'am.
Yeah. No, they won't be penalized. So.
Okay. Do you have a question?
Oh, wait.
Okay, I saw your hand. So, I'm sorry, keep going. I interrupted you.
Oh, yeah, no, thanks for that discussion. It's always fun to talk about readiness. And so as we get, it is my favorite part of the process. And then so. I preach about it all the time. So, but anyways, and kind of regarding readiness and eligibility. So I was really grateful, that Policy Board Scoring Committee met twice over the summer. Had a really good discussion, and I was really grateful to be able to kind of go through that entire readiness process with the board members.
Yes, he does geek out over readiness.
That's my favorite part. So. But yeah, so during those discussions, the scoring committee, we did a tour of the last call for projects. And one of the things that came up was a recommendation to change the sponsor eligibility requirements, specifically regarding nonprofits. And so we've drafted some recommended language to be included in that policy regarding that recommendation. And so it basically requires nonprofits and project submissions to be co-sponsored by a government agency. And so if you can see on the left, you've got the eligible sponsors that are eligible for funding through these project calls. And you can see right away that nonprofits are kind of an outlier. You've got state government, local government, tribal governments, regional transportation authorities, transit agencies, and then any other kind of government agency. And then you have nonprofit organizations. And they're kind of an outlier. And they're also the only eligible sponsors that don't have inherent legal jurisdiction over public property, public infrastructure, or transportation. And so because of that, the recommendation really kind of provides policy specificity. I will say that we already in the readiness process look at coordination and agreements, but there need to be some additional specificity for nonprofits to address that kind of unique position that they have in that list of eligible sponsors, and to make sure that they're developing those infrastructure projects along with you as local jurisdictions. It really it ensures that the projects are being developed in explicit partnership with those affected local governments, and especially if y'all have any local requirements. And I've got a good example on the next slide of what that looks like, but I think one of the things that's important for me as staff is that when I'm giving you a recommendation, I want to make sure that you have full buy-in. If it's from a nonprofit that's in your local jurisdiction, I think it's, it would give me far more confidence knowing that you have vetted that nonprofit and that you're willing to work with them and that you support what they are providing to the policy board.
And Ryan, to that point, because I thought Lonnie brought up some interesting points about what kind of nonprofits, et cetera, work for their 501c1s or C6s, and I think that should probably be in the FAQs. I'll wait for you. You don't need to address that right now, but more specifically, isn't this also due to the fact that the actual law has changed regarding that too as well, correct?
Which law are you referring?
Regarding, so the rationale as to, and the reasonableness as to why we're tightening up the criterion regarding partnerships with nonprofits is due to the fact that the applicable criterion that would actually be able to implement these things have been tightened up, right?
Yes.
Okay, that's a key, I think that's a key portion to, I know being a lawyer, blah, blah, and everything else there, but that's a key portion of this.
So, council members, is two things, Vice Chair, I'm sorry. There's two things. One, basically, with that draft language you saw is just implementing what we've been doing in practice anyway, since 2017. Then, on top of that, 2 years ago now, the Texas Administrative Code was changed. And they've ratcheted down on us, one, having things ready, and then being able to move through the process. Otherwise, we stand to lose money to another region.
But that's true for any project, right? Whether it's a nonprofit or a
that's true
jurisdiction.
for any.
The law did not change to say don't work with nonprofits, or to say that a nonprofit has to have this, sponsorship proved up before.
No, ma'am. The law did not say that.
And we looked this morning. I mean, TxDOT has multiple programs where nonprofits apply for funding. Nonprofits apply to the federal government all the time for funding and know how to go through all the hoops. I just always try to look for barriers and knock down the barriers instead of add barriers. To me, it would be more palatable if in our criteria, we asked a question that showed, how are you supported? How is this project supported by the local government? And then let the nonprofit demonstrate that, and if it satisfies, it satisfies. Instead of saying they can't apply without already, I just know trying to get the county to go that far is years of work, so I just don't like the requirement, and I wanted to say it again. I don't know what the group feels.
So if y'all, Ryan, if you'll finish, but I do want you to highlight, Ashby, what you sent out in your memo in terms of what other MPOs are doing and other organizations regarding that. Because that was one of the things that, as a follow-up to the committee's recommendation, was to look at what other entities were doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and that's kind of getting that last line. I'd say this is a requirement if nonprofits are allowed to apply at all, because it's really kind of up to the state DOTs and the MPOs to really craft those rules based on the federal eligibilities. And I'd say the majority, especially with the state DOTs who also administer their own TASA programs, have this requirement in place. I would say is far more the norm than not. If it was addressed at all in the regulations, so it is fairly common practice across the country. So.
And I think I think Mayor Delisle is here, and there's actually the whole committee's here, so y'all chime in, but this was not an attempt to make it harder. It was actually to give them ability to score better, because that nonprofit would then carry the weight of that local government with them in the scoring, and versus the uncertainty of just a standalone nonprofit. So it wasn't an attempt to exclude anybody. It was actually to make it to where they could probably score better. I know, Mayor Delisle, you had a comment.
I did not, but I can comment.
Okay. I saw a hand.
But I do think that it's a good policy. I used this in an email earlier with somebody. If the Texas Food Bank, the Central Texas Food Bank, was in my town and they wanted to widen the road in front of them, they could put in for the project. But there's a lot that goes into that with city right-of-way and all of that. If we're not partners on the project, that could get messy really quickly. And so I think just having that coordination between the entities and the stakeholders just makes a lot of sense. I was surprised that we didn't already do that.
So Ryan, to that point, and to Commissioner Howard's point, if we had it, I mean, because honestly, I think you get to the end, I think you get both ways, you get to the same result. Because if in fact we say, please demonstrate how you're working with one of your local sponsors on this specific issue, you're still going to get to that specific issue with that. I think that from a realistic standpoint, to the mayor's point, there's not going to be as many sophisticated nonprofits that are going to be utilizing and partnering with on these things. But I also think that, I mean, when I'm hearing Lonnie talk about, well, okay, 501c3 versus 6, how does that apply? Does this apply to construction projects? Yeah. No, that's what's key for. So I was demonstrating for the FAQs.
Yeah.
Those are the things that you're gonna, I mean, for the FAQs that you're gonna have to make sure that you highlight and make people being cognizant of, because I mean, I'm comfortable. If you want to go ahead and make it that, hey, listen, demonstrate how it is, it's still gonna be a question on there, and then once that's done, that you're gonna be diverted another pathway for that. But I also think that it's also smart planning for our standpoint to say, hey, listen, if you want to work with us and get this funding, have these local entities truly vet these nonprofits and how they're going about doing these things before they get to us. Now, the question is, you said you'd rather have them do the vetting. Does that mean that we're not going to do any vetting ourselves whatsoever, or are we just going to take people on their word regarding some sort of demonstrative ILA or some sort of agreement?
That's a good question. So
wait. So when you say we, who do you mean?
Oh, yeah. We is in CAMPO, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually, so this kind of bleeds into this example that I wanted to provide, because one thing, when we get submissions, the local governments are assessed by TxDOT, and they have a risk assessment, and they get scored on their capabilities to deliver a project. We don't have that with nonprofits, and so this is why I think this example is so good, because, so just to go through this example real quick, and I'll get back to that question, is that the City of Austin has a partnership program through the city's Parks and Recreation Department. I think it's a fantastic example of this recommended policy in action, because what this program does is it allows nonprofits to operate and maintain public infrastructure. In the case of the Trail Conservancy, they manage the Ann and Roy Butler Trail system along the Town Lake Trail. Or Lady Bird Lake, excuse me. But what the program does is it provides a rigorous process to evaluate the nonprofit. So they go through this long process, and it's executed through a formal agreement, which was included in the memo if you had a chance to look at that contract. But that's a contract that was approved by City Council. So not only does it have the approval of the entire council, but it really lays out the responsibilities of both parties, both the city and the nonprofit. And the City of Austin did a thorough, analysis of whether or not the Trail Conservancy has the capabilities, the technical capabilities, and the financial capabilities to manage and operate the trail system. And I think it also creates accountability and that legal authorization that we're looking for. But for me as staff, say if the Trail Conservancy decides to submit in this upcoming project call, say they want to extend the trail, west towards the dam for some reason. This is just a hypothetical, but if they were to submit that scope of work to us, one of the things I can do is I can go to that agreement, because the agreement spells out what they can and cannot do on a city-owned facility, and whether or not it authorizes them to do that. And so it gives me the ability to go check and make sure that, yes, the city has authorized them to do this extension of the trail, what process they have to follow to make those improvements. And so that gives me the confidence to come to you and make a recommendation based on that. So that's a fantastic example, I think, of vetting that. I think I assume TxDOT will still do a risk assessment on the nonprofit as well afterwards. But what we do have on file before we make the recommendation are the risk assessments for the local governments. We don't have those for nonprofits yet. Yeah. So.
Okay, so Councilmember Lane.
That's because the longer that I wait, the more things I have to say. So, okay, yeah, that is different. So I have a few different thoughts on this. So one is that in the committee discussions and I believe in our last discussion here, and as we've talked about readiness, we also talked about the need to demonstrate that every jurisdiction that has any ability to stop the project is already on board.
Yes.
And so it almost seems like if you are saying like we need to not allow nonprofits to apply because we have to make sure that the city or the county is on board, we're doing that in two different ways. And I'm not sure that we need two different ways of making sure that every jurisdiction that could stop it is on board. I think it might be like a double negative in the scoring.
I'm not, I'm not sure that the intent was, it was just to have, because there's some projects that may span multiple jurisdictions. It wasn't saying that, at least it wasn't my intent to say that entity had to have an approval from every single person whose jurisdiction it crossed, but they had to have one entity that sponsored, that was the sponsor. Because, in the example of a TxDOT project.
When we were in the committee discussion?
Yeah, it wasn't my intention. I don't know that we vetted that at the committee, but it wasn't my intention that.
Ashby, can you chime in on how you understood that part of it? Because I understood that really very clearly through the couple of examples that we walked through in there, that the intent was any jurisdiction that could stop a project to demonstrate that they're on board.
So both, and I don't remember the exact discussion at the committee, but at least in what we've talked about as staff and what we've drafted, was if a proposed project touched a jurisdiction, we wanted to see that folks were on board. And generally, it would either be a city council vote, but a vote of some kind.
But not every jurisdiction. Because I think you're talking about.
Anyone who had the power to slow down the project.
We were thinking.
Okay.
From
That's how it
multiple
was.
Yes.
Yeah.
If that's something you want to change.
No, so if it affects.
Because that would be one of the challenges of a project that would make it lower rated
up to
if
the
it had to
board
go
to
through all the
decide.
jurisdictions.
Yeah, we were thinking multiple, because otherwise, we go one and we stop and we go.
And
we get gaps.
So is this clear for everybody, or is it clear as mud?
I was midstream, actually, so.
So let me see if I can restate it. So
Sure.
There's projects out there that nonprofits might seek to get funding for that would go through multiple jurisdictions. And so, so the premise is they would need to get some sort of approval from each one of those jurisdictions before they could get funding.
And it was a trail-based example like this example. Yeah. So, if you think about the Red Line Parkway project that follows the Red Line, if you tried to apply for the entire project and you didn't have approvals through all the jurisdictions that passed through, then it would be rated lower. It wouldn't be much harder for it to happen effectively. Whereas if you applied for a segment that went through Austin and Cedar Park, and you'd still have some other things to wrangle, but you'd need to get everyone on board. And then in this example, we've got only Austin, and we have a trail example that is in central Austin with some very well-established nonprofits, and that is where my concern lies in the approach of prohibiting nonprofits from bringing something forward. Because as a council member in Austin, but who represents the areas around here that have gotten put on hold, that don't have existing long-standing, decades-long, ILAs and agreements with the city of Austin, and many of the people representing not Austin in this room, it's important to be able to nourish and feed the relationships that are coming up. And oftentimes it is not the large and established entities, but the newer nonprofits, the ones that are working on a new project, work collaboration on 620 across the county and with me. This is where we get the ideas that begin to transform in different ways. And I personally, I think it is really important to have mechanisms that allow the community to bring forward new ideas. And I don't just mean like individuals coming in and public comment. I mean when there are nonprofits that have organized and demonstrated planning and have begun those relationships. And maybe if they can't demonstrate as thoroughly, then they don't get scored as well. But if they're allowed to apply, it allows the learning to begin, just as I heard such a strong commitment to making sure that supports are in place for smaller jurisdictions. So okay. I know you said the intent was not to bar them from applying, but I thought that that is the change that was suggested. If all it is that they're scored differently, yeah, I can calm back down. But
Mayor, Mayor Schrader.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm fine with them being able to apply but scored differently, but I absolutely see the benefit in requiring all the jurisdictions, because I agree with Ashby. I mean, if we don't have the sign up from all the jurisdictions, what I foresee is exactly what the speaker said, is we're going to allocate the money, then the money is going to get held up for years and not get spent while they're seeking the approval of all the jurisdictions. and then we've got unused dollars sitting there versus projects that do have the approval of all the necessary jurisdictions where they actually get used. And so, while I agree that, it's difficult to go ask them to get the approval of all the jurisdictions before we give them the dollars, the flip side is, why would we allocate dollars to projects that are going to take years before we can actually go spend the dollars, as opposed to allocating dollars to projects that are going to get spent and used for the purpose for which we're allocating them immediately? It's kind of putting the chicken before or cart before the horse. Let's, if it's going to require approval of a jurisdiction, they got to go get the approval of the jurisdiction before we give them the dollars.
Okay.
That just seems to make sense to me.
All right, Mayor Jim.
And I think that's a fairly solvable thing in the way we already solve it. Like you look at the tip, like the big project, say the Capital Expressway, is on that tip multiple different projects, right? So if you're thinking about, say, the Red Line Parkway, like that may be an Austin project, submitted as an Austin project with those boundaries, separate project listing for Cedar Park, separate project listing for Leander, and therefore you'd have the things in place for that project. And so I think my concern is less about, do we need to lump everything in a single, what to the layperson looks like one effort into one project. I think I'm a little more interested in hearing about Mr. Stern's concern about, like, how does this impact non-construction? Clearly, the language makes, I think it's a very sensible point that, like, if there's a physical asset to be built here, there needs to be someone, an entity, something of permanent existence ready to maintain that. If you're talking about design or demand management, or a feasibility study, is that still necessary? Is it even the intent of the additional language?
So on that, Mayor, the language that we drafted does not mention a particular phase. So it applies to planning, it applies to project development, it applies to construction, it applies to engineering. And the reason we're doing that, the Texas Administrative Code change that I referenced earlier, it makes no specific mention there, so it doesn't matter whether it's one or the other one. They want to see that money's moving forward. Second, and this is going back to a comment that Commissioner Howard made earlier, saying, rather than saying you got to have an local agreement or some sort of agreement in place, that we sort of say, okay, if you can demonstrate it in some kind of way. I would prefer to have a standard way of doing that I'm applying to everybody evenly, because that's what TxDOT does to me. So if I have things that are going through to TxDOT, I have to show that the board approved it. Otherwise, they won't process it.
And you want to have a standard way of, you don't want to be parsing between this is a letter of support versus a letter of interest versus an interlocal agreement.
Yes, sir. I would prefer to reduce as much subjectivity as I can, because it makes it easier for me to defend my case.
So as it's proposed, it would require, and you can call it an interlocal agreement with the respective entity.
And that's what I was going to say, to your point, what you were coming on, Mayor, is that if it's going to require an ILA, well, then I think that Commissioner Howard's point's fine then. Then, okay, let's leave it open. Establish, or verify to us that you actually have a partnership with the entity regarding this. Because if it's going to have to be an ILA and then they can't show that, then they're done. And so, to your point, that gets to your point to allow for people to apply that work for that. I haven't seen anything regarding, I think it makes sense that you want to have nonprofits that are, you want to be able to have elasticity, for a better lack of term, for folks who are new on the scene, but you also want to have, honestly, an establishment of folks who have that partnership and idea with that. I think that gets solved by your point, which is, hey, listen, if your local entity you're partnering with, well, the local entity agrees to this person, then okay, we're fine with that. If your local entity doesn't agree with this person, then they're not there. So, I understand what you're saying, Councilmember, about, newer upstarts about it. But I think, that solves itself. I think we're getting a little too in the weeds in some of that aspect.
I think the only thing I would add to that is receiving these funds comes with a lot of complication. And I'm not sure that this is where a new nonprofit wants to cut their teeth on this set of funding, because of just, when you federalize a project, it makes it, a bit more challenging. Mayor Houston.
Yeah, I think this is fine. In theory, this sounds great. And again, I'm like somebody else said, I'm surprised we didn't require it before. I'm thinking maybe it's the level of specificity maybe might be the issue more than whether we do or not require it. But I would like to say I have one on my agenda this week.
Okay.
There you go.
So
Okay.
I will say this, Chair, and then I'll stop. So in terms of a new nonprofit that may be cutting its teeth, one of the ways I see this as potentially helping is it's important to remember that the Federal Aid Highway Program is a reimbursable program. You don't get a check up front to do the work. So you have to do the work.
Great point.
You have to, if you've got a consultant working on it, you got to pay the consultant, and then you've got to submit the billing and wait for TxDOT to process the billing and tell you what was eligible expenses. Then they send you a reimbursement. If a nonprofit does not have a big bank account, the cash flow, like Trail Conservancy or other folks, then they've got to have that money up front. Otherwise, we're hung up. And partnering with the local government may work out a deal where they can front that money for them till they can get reimbursed.
They're going to have to own it.
Yeah, okay, we'll do one more comment here and one more over here.
Just after having heard the discussion that came after my comments. I think that it's absolutely important to get to a point of readiness that's different from what we experienced before. Having listened to this, I disagree with the idea that we don't want to be rating based on the difference between an ILA, an LOI, and a letter of support, just for example. I would actually suggest that that might be an area where we don't need a on and off switch, and we maybe shouldn't, because the amount of time and work that goes into creating an ILA, I mean, doesn't it take like 6 to 12 months? So if,
Depends
no?
on who it is.
Gosh, we can get it done in a week.
Okay.
I
So,
mean, it might
ILA
take longer at the city, but I mean, we've routinely gotten those done quickly.
Okay, all right. I wasn't referring only to the city, but I will back off on that. But I do know for certain that it is a very different level of work between getting even just an LOI to an ILA.
Yeah.
And so, like, I don't know why we wouldn't recognize the difference. But if everyone thinks we should require ILA, like, I've said my piece and you've given me the time and I appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm still learning here, but so I just want to kind of confirm my understanding, but I think this also might help everybody in the room feel a little more comfortable with this change, and that like nothing we're doing here will prohibit a city from using its general fund or its community development funds to do a grant with a nonprofit to test out an idea,
Absolutely.
to build this relationship, to get to the point where they're ready to write an ILA that is also ready for federal funding. That's correct?
Absolutely. I mean, this is just one source of funds. There are a plethora of others that, we have no control over, and they can apply wherever. Yeah.
Chair, I just want to add from the scoring committee's standpoint that I think that the conversation that has been had here is very consistent with the conversation that we had. Essentially, it's to what Mayor Schroeder had to say earlier about you don't want to fund projects that aren't really ready and they haven't crossed enough thresholds, because that's what creates the equity amongst the entire board and all of the jurisdictions. It's a competitive process. We all want to get these projects funded, and we need some kind of method to determine what projects are ready to go forward. And the requirement for letters of support, I think, helps us to meet that threshold. So I think that was the conversation we had.
Thanks. All right. So, Ryan, back to your.
Thanks. And I appreciate the discussion. And so kind of shifting gears, just one other thing we needed to cover for this item is the funding forecast and summary. So as you recall from the meeting last time, we discussed over-programming, which is a portfolio management strategy where we strategically award more projects than we have actually projected funding, and that's to ensure that when projects do move around, and they will at some point, we're maximizing our funding utilization related back to that TAC rule that we've been discussing. that we're maximizing our federal funding usage every single year. So traditionally, we've done 15%, and that's been a pretty safe amount, but based on what we're looking ahead at, and the size of the projects that we are programming, along with the funding opportunities that are kind of, around the state and around the country and federal funding redistribution, that it's actually advantageous for us to increase that amount to 30% to help maximize those use of funds. I do want to point out that we did talk to the TxDOT Finance Division and discuss this amount and got their concurrence on this amount. On the 30% recommendation, so that is what staff is recommending. Again, this is all predicated on having enough ready projects to program to hit that over-programming target, but we'll definitely keep you informed as we see what has been received in January, but right now we are recommending an over-programming rate of 30%. And again, these are estimates. Obviously, these will, I would say these aren't likely to change, that they are guaranteed to change, and we'll keep you updated on that as we go through this process. And so that concludes my presentation. So we are requesting the policy board approve the scoring committee's recommendation regarding the policy change, as well as the over-programming target for the upcoming 2028 to 2031 project call. So thank you.
Okay. And I will make that motion that we accept the recommended policy change and over-programming target of 30%.
I will second that motion.
Second by Commissioner
Chair,
Barker.
would y'all entertain splitting it? Because I'd like to vote for part of it, but not all of it.
Sure. I will make a motion that we accept the policy change related to the nonprofits. So if you'll withdraw your second,
Okay, I'll withdraw
from
my
the previous
second.
motion.
Yeah.
Okay,
withdraw it.
and so I'm making a new motion on a policy change recommended by the scoring committee.
Now, second.
Okay. All right, so we're going to vote on that one specific item, the nonprofit policy change. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Staff, did y'all get that? Raise your hand, keep your hand up so staff can. Okay.
Kim, you got it?
All right. All opposed?
And I have 2 votes.
Okay.
And we'll make note, they know who the proxies are. So we're assuming that whoever's carrying a proxy is voting for their proxy as well. Right.
I'll do it like this, 2 votes.
I'll do it like this. Okay. All right. So the motion passes to change the policy regarding nonprofits. All right. And I will now make a motion that we accept the entire report with and adopt the scoring criteria along with the 30% target for over-programming.
I'll still second that.
All right. There's motion and a second. Any more discussion? All right. Is that a vote or is that? Okay. All in favor? All right. Any opposed? All right. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, Ryan. Okay, that was item number 8. Moving on to item number 9, discuss and take appropriate action on advanced funding agreements for the TASO studies.
Good afternoon. I'm Will Liska, Regional Planning Manager for CAMPO. In June of this year, the Transportation Policy Board approved funding from the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside Program for CAMPO to conduct 2 studies. One is the Hunter Road Trail Connectivity and Development Study, which will be conducted in partnership with the Great Springs Project. And the second is the Eanes Creek Trail Feasibility Study, which will be done in partnership with the City of Westlake Hills. CAMPO will be using the awarded funds to procure consultants to conduct these studies, but to do so, CAMPO must first enter into advanced funding agreements with TxDOT to access the funds. On this item, we're just asking the board to authorize CAMPO to execute these AFAs, but I want to emphasize that you'll see more items in the coming months related to initiating these studies, including consultant selection. So with that, CAMPO staff recommends the policy board authorize the CAMPO executive director to enter into advanced funding agreements with TxDOT for the Hunter Road Trail Connectivity and Development Study and the Eanes Creek Trail Feasibility Study.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Howard, second. I saw a hand raised over here by Mayor Schrader. Any discussion? You're going to make these AFAs happen really fast, right, Tucker?
It's gotten better.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? All right, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Will. Let's see, next item is the Safety Action Plan.
Thank you, Chair Long. Thank you, board members. Thank you to everybody who participated in this Regional Safety Action Plan. Your input has been crucial, and your support for improving roadway safety will be vital to the success of our efforts. The work on this plan began in May of 2024, and over the course of the next year, CAMPO staff and our regional partners built this effort from the ground up by developing 6 county safety action plans. The Regional Safety Action Plan furthers that work by assessing regional safety needs and offering strategies to meet our safety goals. Today I'm going to walk you through some of what you'll find in our draft Regional Safety Action Plan and ask for your initial feedback. It's our hope that the work of the RSAP will move us in the right direction to safer streets and roads for all. I'd just like to start by giving us a sense of the gravity of the issue here of roadway safety. Our state has had no days without a traffic death since November 7th of 2000. Locally, this means that there's been roughly 6 deaths per week. Thus, it's clear that to protect our families, our friends, our neighbors, we need to find and implement new solutions to make our roadways safer. This draft Regional Safety Action Plan lays out potential solutions for CAMPO, our member agencies, and our regional partners to take on. The vision and goals that this plan offers are the same that we previously presented to the TAC and to the board as well. It mirrors what is found in all the county safety action plans and what has been adopted by a number of commissioners' courts and city councils in the region. The goals align with those found in the Texas State Highway Safety Plan as well. So we went out to various communities to better understand what roadway safety means in the CAMPO region. Our 3 rounds of public engagement included both in-person events with the locations seen here on the map and online open houses with virtual boards and surveys. We can summarize the feedback that we received with about 6 key regional safety concerns, which include congestion and growth, unsafe intersections and corridors, a lack of safe walking and biking options, speeding, aggressive driving, and unsafe passing, lighting, particularly in rural areas, and infrastructure gaps, and concerns about community character. Our analysis also sought to better understand the disparities in roadway safety found in underserved communities. We looked at some areas and groups found in the 2050 RTP, as described on the left hand of the slide here. And our analysis showed that underserved communities face significantly increased risks when compared to other areas, and saw 67% of fatal and serious injury crashes in the region. This fact highlights the need for action and further prioritization when we implement safety improvements and strategies. The county safety action plans summarized in this regional plan allow us to better understand what locations and contributing factors should be prioritized. One task was to help identify emphasis areas that could focus our specific strategies and site improvements. The next step to enacting these plans at the county level are to seek or commit to funding further study for these improvements, champion the policy changes that they mentioned, and begin to monitor progress in terms of projects completed and crashes reduced. Based on the work of the county safety action plans, our analysis of crashes at the regional level, and a review of relevant safety issues, we have included in this plan 172 proposed improvements at corridors and 163 proposed improvements at intersections. These improvements are supported and furthered by a safety toolbox of systemic safety treatments, policy and program development, and behavioral strategies to be used by CAMPO and our local partners. The strategies that we offer in this plan follow the Safe System Approach framework that underlies SS4A action planning. I will do a quick review of each of those areas, but greater detail can be found in the plan itself. Strategies for safer people include education and public outreach campaigns, greater enforcement and accountability, and programs to support key populations like younger or older drivers. Safer vehicles means promoting adoption of advanced vehicle technologies and enhancing heavy and commercial vehicle safety. Safer speeds means working together for context-sensitive speed limit setting and speed management planning, using speed feedback signs, and implementing engineering and design countermeasures. Safer roads means continuing to update our network prioritization tools like a high injury network and furthering multimodal design and operational improvements. And finally, post-crash care means optimizing emergency response and clearance and improving rapid detection and notification systems. To take on these strategies and to get closer to our safety goals, this plan proposes an implementation framework seen here and offers potential roles for CAMPO, our member agencies, and regional partners. As I mentioned earlier, we are looking for your feedback on the draft plan, but we also want to better understand if you agree with how we describe CAMPO's role in safety planning, and which strategies and action you would like CAMPO and our agency partners to explore further in the near term. Next month, when we present the final copy of the plan to the TPB, we also present our recommendations for some initial implementation actions and strategies that CAMPO can undertake to further this planning work. The draft RSAP that's included in the TPB packet is offered for your review. Please reach out to Ashby and me if you have any questions or concerns that you want to discuss. You can send any written feedback on the draft to us as well. Comments on this draft are due by October 24th. We plan to bring the plan back to the TAC for recommendation at the October TAC meeting and present to them any feedback that we received from board members and our proposed edits to the draft. Finally, we plan to bring the RSAP back to the board members for action at the November meeting. Thank you, and I can answer any questions now that you may have.
Does anybody have any questions? Just as a reminder, in your packet today, the plan starts on page 28 and runs, I don't know, a good ways, but take the time to look at it. I would encourage you to do that.
Quick question, just for the public. Can you explain what community character means in your context?
Yeah, so I think what we notice a lot is that because our region is growing so much, people are generally commenting about that whenever we go, out to different communities in the area. So I think that has a bit to do with, the amount of traffic that has generated since then, and how different either neighborhoods or parts of town may be impacted by that. And so I think that really what people are reflecting on is how changes to the congestion or amount of traffic on a roadway have led to them, maybe not being as easily able to cross the street or to have their kids play out on the street and things like that. So that's generally what I've heard when people talk about that, especially related to safety planning. I know that obviously people talk about community character in a lot of different ways when they talk about land use or other things, but when we've gone out to talk about safety planning to folks, a lot of times it's like, I can't let my kids play out on the street anymore because there's cars that are cutting through the neighborhood or whatever that might be their example. So that's typically what I've seen.
Thanks, because I had an inkling folks would have a question about that. Additionally, I thought it was quite revealing, to say the least, what you were talking about regarding issues in underserved communities, and also talking about the rural gap, because more and more communities becoming less and less rural in our region. And this, if y'all haven't had a chance to go through this is a pretty good, robust draft regarding that. How do you see that plays into the community? This is why I asked the community character aspect, because that's only going to change further. You're going to continue to have more transit, more operational issues just from not only safety issue or other aspects from that as well. So moving forward, do you just see that because our region is becoming more and more urban, for a better lack of term, that you'll have folks who lament the good old days, for a better lack of term, with that, while at the same time, relatively speaking, we have to be cognizant of the detrimental issues that we see in some of our underserved communities and some of these rural communities regarding true transit issues?
Right, and if I think I understand the line of that you're speaking to here, I think it's a matter of making sure that the safety work that we do is advancing, safe streets for everybody who lives in that community. And that's really the concern that we try to put forward in this effort right now, because we can urbanize in a good way or we can urbanize in another way. So I think that every entity on this board, does good planning and good work on the local level. We want to make sure that we're sharing those strategies across the board so that we all know how to better make the kind of urbanization that's occurring in our region reflective of our communities, but also reflective that we want to keep everyone safe.
Thank you.
Vice Chair, one of the things I'll ask as part of this, and this would mainly apply to the cities that actually have the ability to control land use, unlike counties, is when you have that development coming in, whether it's subdivisions or other things, is asking that developer to look at putting in sidewalks as part of the improvements.
And left turn lanes and decel lanes.
And sometimes even raised medians.
Yeah.
So, because it's easier to do that on the front end than it is to go back and try to retrofit those things later.
Absolutely.
Well, I just wanted to make mention, in your reports, it shows, the high impact areas. Is there a way to share those details of how you identified those specific areas on our roadways? In other words, the incident accounts?
Let me make sure I understand. You're talking about the high severity crash areas?
Yes.
Correct. Yeah, we can share some of that information with you, and I think in terms of maybe if you're looking more closely at Burnett County as well, we can share some of that data specifically for Burnett County too.
Good. Well, I just wanted to make the point that we're number one in roadway and lane departure accidents. So
yes, no,
we don't like that title. We'd like to see if we can improve that.
No, I agree with you there, Commissioner.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you.
That will take us now to item number 11, Ashby, Executive Director's Report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I think we've got some slides. So I meant to do this at the last meeting, and I don't know what happened, but I wanted to commend TxDOT for the fantastic job they did of getting the bridge replaced on FM 1431 at Cow Creek, and then also commend Travis County for getting the bridge across Sandy Creek done as well. Two vital roadways for folks in northwestern Travis County, and also going, though the limits of the Cow Creek project was not in Burnett County, but getting to and from Burnett County makes a difference there as well. I think the TxDOT one was sort of record time.
28 days to build this bridge. I would say that we can't do that all the time, but this was a situation where we were able to do it in 28 days. So
I know. I asked Tucker why he can't do this more often. He's like, well.
But to say, let's hold them accountable to that moving forward. Yeah.
That's why I had to qualify that. This was a special situation. So yes.
Then readiness will be a lot easier.
Y'all are stealing my thunder a little bit, because one of the what I'll call an innovation I heard the other day was that TxDOT looked at other bridge projects in the state where they weren't as far along and they had bridge girders that were sitting there waiting, and so y'all moved them around to where you needed them right now. Is that something that's going to sort of happen throughout TxDOT?
Well, I think it would depend on the situation. So if there's another emergency where a bridge completely washed out, we were fortunate to be able to find girders that were of the size that would work on this, and then design the bridge around those. And it just so happened those girders being fabricated weren't needed at the time on that Yoakum district project. So, I mean, things lined up very well for us to hit that 28 days.
Well, and the innovation of finding the girders and then designing the bridge around it, that.
Yeah.
Usually it's the other way around,
exactly.
But yeah.
Yeah, Yoakum called, they want their girders back.
So next slide, please. So also we had the groundbreaking for the US 183A frontage roads project at long last.
Hallelujah.
And then we had two open houses, one on FM 973. So this is going from 290 up to 79 to Taylor. So this is going up to Samsung And then we also had one on FM 969 going essentially from the Tesla plant on 130 back to where it connects back down to 71 in Bastrop. Two major facilities for this region. And then, so on the FM 973, the northern portion, because that's broken into two pieces, the northern portion, for all intents and purposes, Williamson County. That one is moving forward a little bit faster. And then the southern piece, we're still working on, but we're going to be coming, we, CAMPO staff, will be coming back to you probably at next month's meeting, because the city of Manor has asked us CAMPO staff to consider helping them get that to 90% design so they can preserve right-of-way for the ultimate build-out.
And they already have.
They have the funding dedicated.
Yeah, they have the funding dedicated, and they're about to blow up with that HEB and the.
That's why we're
Home Depot over there. Yeah.
And then FM 969, not only is it all the residential development that's happening on that roadway, but also one of the things that I have been concerned about for years and continue to be concerned about is evacuation routes. And those of you that were here when we had the Bastrop fires years ago, the only way they really had to get out was 71. I would like to have another way for folks to get out in case something happens again. And then to Commissioner Beckett's credit, when I came on as CAMPO ED back in 2014, she was asking for improvements on 969 back then, and not only in her county, but also in Travis County, because she saw what was coming.
Now, every time I drive down 969, I'm still surprised by the lack of options should anything come about.
Yes, and all those S-curves.
Yeah.
Do we have another slide?
That must be.
Nope, that's it.
Okay.
I just wanted to clue in our board here of a conversation that Ashby and I have been having via email with the CAMPO team. I did ask for kind of a 10-year look back at officer positions for CAMPO. As you all know, our chair will be completing her term at the end of this month. Okay. Yeah. Well, just wanted to clue everyone into that 10-year history and to circulate that if you're interested in being an officer, that we would welcome those conversations. I believe the officer election will take place in January, and I just want to make sure that we have plenty of time to consider it. Because my very first CAMPO board meeting, I remember the officer positions were not widely discussed, and it was a surprise to some of our board members, and so I would hate for that to happen again. So I really would like this to be a transparent process and welcome that conversation. In fact, if we could share the history of the last 10 years of officers with the board, I think that would be helpful for our board members to see.
Thank you for preempting my comments. Appreciate that. So chair announcements. One is I want to say this is going to be Mayor Delisle's last meeting. I don't know if you all have heard, she is moving on, and we will miss you on the board, and thank you for your contributions to the board. You've been fantastic, and I really appreciate it, and we wish you Godspeed and best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll miss y'all too. This is one of my favorite boards.
And Mayor Mitchell, do we have you for one more meeting?
Maybe, we'll see. You're showing up for the meeting. Come on now.
Well, in the event that you don't show up for the next meeting, we likewise appreciate your contributions to the board and to the subcommittees that you've served on, and you will be missed, so thank you. And to finish what was mentioned by Councilmember Fuentes, we will have board elections in January, and the current boards, their 2-year terms, and the current board members' terms are up at the end of this year. And as I am not running for re-election, I will not be serving, you don't want to bog things down by serving as the board chair for another year, so that will be opening up. I would strongly encourage you to consider my awesome vice chair, Councilmember Matea, to take on that role. That was kind of part of the thought when we was that you'd kind of roll into that, but that will be up to the board. But then we'll do that in the first meeting of 2026. And I think that's it, other than just as a reminder, the next TAC meeting is October 27th, and the next board meeting is November 10th. With that, at 3:31, we stand adjourned. Thank you all for being here.